All right. Thank you for coming on the Fox Den, Mr. Philosophase.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and tell us the origins of that? That would be a really great way to start.
Sure, excellent. So I'm huge into deep thinking, introspective thinking. Some would call it philosophy. Now, I'm not an academic per se. I'm into the modern stuff that's going on, this new phase we have here. So we're in the phase of deep thinking in this information age. We are the Philosophase.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. Since you've listened to the podcast before, I will hit you with a question early on. Who would you meet out of three people, living or dead, or any collection of the two, if you could?
Mm-hmm. I can do that. So the three people I admire most are, one of them is living. The three people are Joe Rogan, George Carlin, and Alan Watts.
Wow. Okay. Let's hear why.
So these people they're not considered philosophers in the traditional sense, but they're more modern people who channel these deep ideas in interesting / entertaining ways. You know, Joe Rogan, podcaster, UFC commentator, doesn't traditionally come off as a philosopher / deep thinker, but the way he channels these ideas to a wide audience is just very interesting, very appealing, very admirable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And George Carlin, he did the same thing, but in a very funny way. You know,
right.
As a comedian, you wouldn't expect him to have these deep, thought-provoking ideas, but, you know, you listen to what he says, some bits you aren't even laughing, you're just sitting there thinking, which is just fascinating. And of course, Alan Watts, I'm sure a lot of us in this community, you know, we're big fans of him. Some deep words coming from him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. I hear Joe Rogan a lot because he resonates with people on that kind of pure philosophy level, man, where it's someone who maybe has an interesting journey that's not your traditional academic, to say the least. Do you remember when he used to be on Fear Factor?
Yeah, I watched that when I was really young.
Me too. So that was one of the ways I learned about him. And he just has that quick wit, you know, that involves just on your feet kind of a back and forth, and it leads itself very well to podcasting, which he later got into, obviously, which is what a lot of people know him for now. So do you have any favorite episodes of his show? Potentially favorite guests?
Oh, definitely. The ones where he has Duncan Trussell on there. Have you seen those?
You know what? No, I haven't. I will have to check into that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because Duncan, he's a fellow stand-up comedian. Those two actually lived together for a little bit. So when they get together, it's just very interesting to hear him ramble on. And that, in my opinion, those are the deepest episodes that they go on there.
Right. That makes a lot of sense then, that he has that prior sort of relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to focus on your brand. What got you into, I think your introduction to your name really helps out with that question, but what got you into producing YouTube videos? What inspired you to address this from a modern philosophical perspective?
Well, in many ways, the three people I listed, I discovered them through YouTube. You go on YouTube, you type in deep videos, Joe Rogan comes up with a lot of videos of him talking to this music, as well as Alan Watts. So listening to these videos, it showed me, these men were channeling their ideas through ways that they had no idea would come to fruition.
Right.
That art form just really inspired me to start making these videos where I'd speak to music, to share these ideas in entertaining ways.
True. Yeah, you do have some good background music there. It's pretty fun stuff. Very, very lighthearted and bouncy.
That's right. A lot of royalty-free beats out there that are great for making some projects.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. I like the royalty-free stuff. So what is one of your favorite videos that you've done, do you think, on your channel, which people can find on YouTube?
Probably my most popular video has been the one on Truth Contest. I don't know if you've heard of that site at all.
Yes, I have. Tell us about that, though, for listeners out there. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so essentially back in the day, there was this site called truthcontest.com
Okay.
where basically a competition you go to basically a contest for articles, who has the best article on what the truth of the universe and everything that exists is.
Okay.
Anyway, this one dude wrote this feature-length book that was obviously the top spot on there. So the video I made, and that book was quite influential to me. It shaped many of my ideas around what was communicated through there. So basically I made a video just sharing about the significance of that book, and I didn't think many people have read it or heard of it, but what was awesome was seeing what the community had to say about that. A lot of people have read it. Many were familiar with that community and what surrounded this truth movement, they called it.
Right. You actually have your results. Your name comes up, your website, when people Google the truth contest, and it says, whatever happened to truth contests at Philosophase.com. You have an article from last year about this same time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It was interesting because there's hardly anything out there about this. So just sharing something that I didn't think many people had heard of, but it was interesting seeing, I guess, how similar all our paths were crossing and intermingling as we've heard of this thing.
Yes, The Present is the name of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to get into how that's influenced you, what you like about it?
Sure. So essentially, I discovered this site through, you go on YouTube, any music video, you see people spam in the comments like, oh, go check out this site. So went to the site, read the book. The book, the first 30 pages of this is just what captivated me because it talks about, what is the meaning of everything. And what perked my attention about this was its big thing it said was, hey, turn off your mind. Your mind is deceiving you. And as an intellectual, you read that and you say, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would you turn off your mind? The mind is a good thing.
Right.
You read more and you see, well, through not overanalyzing everything and through trying to see things for what they are, you actually gain some deeper insight into what is going on. It talked about how not many people can really just settle down and experience the now, The closest book I've read to this has been Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it just sounds so simple and so basic, just live the present. But when you think about it, very few of us are ever just settling in to just experience everything for what it's worth. So definitely an eye-opener reading that book and seeing what it said in there.
Right. Going through some of your previous tweets too, speaking about enlightenment, truth, and considering serious topics, your thoughts on surface level activities are pretty apparent. You're not too big of a fan of the sort of casual astrological Twitter milieu, we could say. What fired you up about that?
About just deep thoughts about everyday activities?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I'll live your average life, 8 hours a day. I work in a cubicle, but yet still have many deep insights from working a corporate job, So what I communicate is just, it's not complex to be a deep thinker. It can be for everyone. It doesn't require anything fancy. You don't have to be an academic per se, but rather deep thinking, no matter who you are or what you do, it's possible and it's important for shaping and enhancing your life.
Okay. So you think that no matter your job, no matter what you're doing, you need to have some component of insight and exploration of what makes you tick. And so there's really no excuse for avoiding that, it sounds like. It's kind of
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Who are some of your favorite authors? Eckhart Tolle is obviously a really good example there. If you have any others, any authors who have really shaped you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, the guy who wrote The Present, he just went by the pseudonym Michael. That was it. Not many people have heard of him outside of that.
Sure.
But many of whom influenced by, people see my name and they think, oh, you must be influenced by, Plato, Aristotle, all the greats of back then. But more so, it's the modern philosophers we're seeing today, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, all these modern
Sam Harris
of our time.
Yes. Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. People love to talk about those thinkers. Now, one of those is pretty neutral, pretty Switzerland as far as the whole thing goes, Rogan. But the other two have been surrounded by some controversy.
Definitely.
Fascinating stuff. What got you interested in producing content specifically for YouTube?
So YouTube, above all else, of all the platforms that exist out there, YouTube, I've gained most of my pivotal ideas from that platform. So, these deep videos with insightful dialogue, deep music,
right.
Greatest art form ever. And
yes,
YouTube,
very visual, yeah.
Absolutely. And YouTube had the most of what was on there. So I knew I wanted to create this art. I didn't think initially I'd associate my face with it, but I ended up doing that. And if anything, gave a more personal touch to this art form, took it in a much more casual, laid-back direction than initially anticipated.
Yeah.
From there, through putting out content, what I've learned through there has been so astronomical. I've learned way more than I thought I would, which I'm sure you're experiencing now too, creating this podcast. You'll learn a lot about the fundamentals of, gaining a name on the internet, as well as
true.
Learning different aspects beyond just the topic you're discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. That's for sure. The medium is the message, right? As Marshall McLuhan said, it is.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Twitter is, in my opinion, the next best at conveying ideas and messages. We got short ideas, sound bites conveyed in very small doses. I think the next installment of Twitter, beyond just 280 character ideas, I think our next platform we're going to see is a social media platform where you can only post once a day. We like limitations, we like constraints, we like order. So I think the next installment of what we're going to see is a platform where you really have to think about the one most important idea you can have in a 24-hour period and share it that way. That's my opinion on the next step of social media.
That would be fascinating, because I think one of the fundamental principles of human nature is restrictions help with creativity. If someone feels constrained to get their best thought out there in like a thread form or whatever, they may really focus on something that they wouldn't have via Twitter, because if you have all the time in the world or all the possible tweets, you don't feel narrowed down to share the most important things sometimes. It's a very paradoxical thing. It's like, or you're overwhelmed by decisions, right? You've got decision fatigue of what to post, when, where. But if you have to narrow it to something, that really empowers people to focus on what they think is most crucial. It's a good idea.
Yeah, so definitely it'd be a lot less clutter going on in a platform like that, per se.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite YouTubers who inspire you?
So the YouTubers I like the most are the ones who edit videos, so create art forms such as that. So, Life Eternal. I think I Release Endorphins was one of those. Just YouTubers where they take all these, royalty-free clips, royalty-free music, just combine everything together. Those have what I've found to be the most entertaining.
How about those Reddit reading ones? Those can get pretty addictive because it's fun to put them on the background, hear somebody read these stories.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, people doing that as well. Because here here they're bringing just their voices and just bringing it in, this other art form that was created, but just giving a different perspective to it, per se.
Yeah, that's true. So, some of your videos have some really catchy titles, like the best superpower, there's only one. why don't you tell us what inspired you to create that? Because that was a nice video there.
Hmm. Yeah, so I was actually I was in a comedy club, and the comedian, he starts getting the audience involved. It's not a great place at all. The comedian was not that funny. He looks on the audience and says, "Hey, if you could have any superpower, what would you have?" He points to me, and I said, it came obvious to me. I thought, well, I'd want the ability to control reality, because then you could have any superpower you want. So I started thinking about this more, and I thought, man, if you had that superpower, that would encompass all the superpowers. So, and that's part of what I do with my videos. I try to take a simple question, maybe that's not even that serious, and then just go hardcore on it, just going as deep as I can, just to see multiple perspectives of it. So, a question like that, simple icebreaker question, it has many layers to it, many sides of that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought it down to a really good Marvel reference of Thanos. Pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that part of the movie just confused me so much, because I thought, man, if you had the reality power, why would you need any other ones? Shouldn't this movie just end here?
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. So I like your video on memetics as well, the memes and deep thoughts. So you're a bit of a meme aficionado. Do you have any particular ones that you love?
Yeah, I think definitely the doomer boomer memes, that are exploding right now. Very fascinating.
Those are extremely prescient too. It's a humorous way of looking at the sort of generational malaise and depression that Gen Z and the millennials are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as I start my, young adult life, many of them are very pertinent, showing the decisions I can, make for where I want to go, being in my 20s. So it's very significant in this time of life.
True, absolutely. And so your video on the topic, memes and deep thoughts, for everyone who wants to follow along, discusses memes as part of the culture and they connect us. And you draw and of course you cite the inimitable Richard Dawkins, who talks about memes throughout his literature as these ideas that evolve and are transmitted like genes. Okay, and that's something that now we think of memes obviously as the jokes, as the pictures, but they're part of that heritage of ideas that propagate, transmit, survival of the fittest. Right, there are plenty of memes that don't make it, that don't resonate as much. Mm-hmm. So you took an approach to that I'd never heard before, where you said memes are like the Greek gods of this era, where they represent different feeling states and almost like the summoning of those. Tell me what inspired you to come up with that metaphor, because I enjoyed that greatly.
Yeah, definitely archetypes. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, Hero of a Thousand Faces. Yes.
Yeah. So I've read that. Hero's Journey. Power of Myth. Very interesting ideas presented in there, because he brings up ideas I'd never really thought about before. Here's the significance of religion. Here's why mythology is still around. He said, these are ideas that are very applicable to what's going on today as well. These are ideas that are universal, that we can all latch onto. Those doomer / boomer / zoomer memes, those are archetypes, because we all know a person or people that fits that exact personality trait, and those are, I guess, transcendent personas that we could see ourselves evolving into. Similarly to the Greek gods, these are archetypes who represent a persona we can embrace, qualities we can latch onto. So memes, they seem corny, they seem funny, but there's something deep going on with those.
Right. And it's just under conscious awareness sometimes. There's the transmitted, the meme is the vessel for this idea that we're ingesting and may not even know what it all represents. So you like the Zoomer one with the Wojak picture. It's fascinating that's the name of the image there.
Yeah, and I mean, way back, that was considered the feels guy.
It
So
is,
it
yes.
was
Yeah.
interesting how that particular one evolved into, I guess, multiple different personas as
Yes.
well.
Well, so it was ask me anything by user claiming to be user Wojak. Okay, so that's where the name comes from. The bald man illustration discovered on the image board. Okay. Looking at this stuff. It's fascinating stuff. I mean, that picture, people don't know the origins of it. The feels guy, and now it's evolving into something else. I like that you brought up in your video that, or was it your friend Greg was talking about cave paintings being the first memes? Because that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it just shows that pictographs are such a popular way to convey things because, I mean, you see a picture of a buffalo, you immediately know what that is, what it stands for, either nourishment, food, danger, if it's charging at you. All these different things are encapsulated in an image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And our communication is reverting back to hieroglyphics,
Yes.
seeing the popular usage of memes, emojis. We're latching on to communicating more so through symbology rather
Yeah.
than just the words.
It's going full circle. It's cycling through again. Many people would say that in a postmodern world is kind of the bookend to modernism. There was premodernism where pictures and pictographs were important, and then modernism where the written word is everything. And now in this postmodern world that's leaning into metamodernism at this point, pictographs and images are paramount again. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really reverting into the fundamentals. We look at the basis of computer languaging. We see the ultimate fundamental is just binary code. So it's just
Right.
zeros and ones is really the only way it's communicating. So, anyone who works with numbers is realizing math might be the universal language here. So
Yeah.
it's the absolute fundamental is just interesting when we think about the basis of communication as a whole.
Yes, absolutely. So switching gears here, talk to us about what inspired you to make that video, why being different is important. Because you talk a bit about that sign that's upside down that gets your attention
Mm-hmm.
for ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes into the entire basis of what got me into deep thinking in general.
Right.
I grew up in rural Midwest America where the whole town was just an echo chamber, surrounded by cornfields, and I always bring up these deep ideas, because in me there was a strong desire to, I guess, transcend the norm, be different.
Yeah.
And everywhere we see every innovation, every step into progress, every move towards truth was someone having to be different. Now, of course, having to be normalized in a sense so that they could communicate the importance of an innovation, but rather, there was, only dead fish follow the stream in a sense. It basically goes down into one of those ideas, one of those metaphors.
Yeah, you said that in the video, and I think that's very prescient. People need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Be
Yeah.
different for a reason, not simply to be different, because you were saying that it can go the other extreme too in your video, that it can go into being quirky in a very hollow and maybe even bewildering and socially acceptable manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just because everyone's walking on their feet, should you, walk on your hands, But
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they embrace the being different just for the sake of it, just because,
Yes.
you got ironically, your hipster community, that's one example of we just need to do anything that's not mainstream, even if there's really no significance to it,
Right.
in our lives for what will enhance ourselves,
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes down to having an identity that there's a fragility there, that if you're similar to anyone at all, that's unacceptable to the self, right? You have to be so different and curate your image so much. And that's just like an implosive burden. We can get into that. But the Juuling versus vaping video. I really want to talk about that. That's great. Can you tell me about that format? So you've got you and a female companion on a park bench talking. What was the etiology, the origin of that format? Is that like a friend of yours, like what, a girlfriend? What is that? What's going on there? That's pretty fun.
Yeah, so there's been quite a few times my girlfriend and I have just, sat down on a bench and just, talked about any ideas that come to mind. So that conversation came after like 2 hours of just rambling on about things. And I thought, this is a pretty funny bit. I can, edit this together. So
that's very good. How did you two meet?
We met back in high school. So it's been quite some time.
Been a time of good rapport. Yeah, you can kind of tell that the bant comes easy. So to kind of catch viewers up here, listeners, whatever, wherever you're seeing this, the Juuling versus vaping debate, very lighthearted, very fun stuff. You relate it to smoke signals. You go really archetypical and evolutionary with it, that smoke has a sort of communal context. Get into that a little bit. What inspired that line of thought? Because that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I mean, something that's just a cultural image, that's kind of blowing up right now, vaping, Juuling. We thought, there's got to be something deeper to this, Freud, would say, oh, this is, oral fixation, as you
Bingo.
Pointed out. Yeah. But, I thought, what if this goes into communication? What if this goes into a sense of community, sitting around a fire, because Juuling, vaping, you see that at a lot of, parties, a lot of social gatherings. So.
Oh, you do.
So annoying. But, yeah, it's, so I thought, what if there's something deeper to this activity?
And I think that we can go really deep down that rabbit hole with the fact that people don't like, I think that people don't like vaping because there's a spectrum. It's almost like the uncanny valley where people can see stuff that looks more real than real and their mind just doesn't accept that. Mm-hmm. So with cigarettes, I mean, there was a time when people were probably smoking the first cigarettes that looked odd, that was something that wasn't quite culturally congruent yet. But it doesn't have the same look to it. There's something sleek and hyper-technological about the Juul, and people probably on a primal level find it to be distasteful, no pun intended, how odd that combines a literal imbibing of technology, right? The cyborg element to that. Cigarettes are far from natural, but they combust, they burn like a natural material. There's something about a piece of plastic and it contains a pod. I mean, they're called Juul pods. There's something alien to that. I think people on an unconscious level reject that level of artifice, of artificiality. I don't know if you've given that any thought, that it's just like a literal consumption or sucking of technology into the self that seems somewhat invasive.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, it's interesting seeing the cultural dynamics of how that played out. You watch old movies, everyone's smoking. You go into an old lecture hall, there's ashtrays on the desks, So cigarettes, we see someone smoking cigarettes, culturally that's, got some stigma now. Juuling and vaping, that's seen as more normal. So it's like there's these two different perspectives, to this change we've observed. Sometimes we see it better in that sense. Other times, as you said, it's the combining of technology into one of the initial steps into biotechnology, biomechanics. That
transhumanism, beyond human.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to see, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think we're ever going to see vaping reach that cultural level where people start putting it in television shows or beyond reality TV, because that was a real concerted effort to push smoking into a normalization, into a normal cultural hallmark there. And you see now the Truth campaign that is coming out against vaping, saying, well, there's more nicotine in a Juul pod than like 4 packs of cigarettes, which, by the way, has to do with the fact that the pods are meant to be smoked for a longer amount of time than a pack of cigarettes. There's kind of like a miscommunication. I don't know. There's something to that there. Misinformation potentially or a misunderstanding of how much you're supposed to smoke the pods in one sitting. But there seem to be cultural forces at play that probably won't allow that to be marketed to younger people beyond seeing people. I mean, younger people out seeing each other doing it, right? I don't know that they'll ever be featured in media vaping to the extent that smoking was, because of how conscious we are now of health concerns and how that's just not seen as kosher to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The media has really cracked down on the whole nicotine thing. You know, if the media will ever, if we'll ever gain consciousness about the alcohol issue, I don't know, because that's an interesting one.
I can't believe you just brought that up, because I was going to go there too. I was going to say, well, if people would stop featuring drinking in movie, I mean, you never heard about driving on nicotine, because you're not going to crash a car typically. So, I mean, that's not intoxicated driving. Alcohol is such a communal thing, and it blunts inhibition so much that I wonder if the media will ever demonize it as much. There's something more culturally pervasive about alcohol and embedded, and we could analyze that than nicotine. It seems easier to cut that out of the picture than alcohol on a historical level.
Nicotine, it seems like there's specific communities that I guess embrace that, whereas alcohol, you have many more communities that embrace that. You find it at professional events, very laid back, casual events. It's like many occasions you can integrate alcohol into, whereas you can't do that with nicotine.
It's a social lubricant. Yeah. Well, and if you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with hookah smoking, but you want to talk about the communal smoke signals to that, man. You pass the pipe around. It kind of is a conversation thing, a table piece, a centerpiece of conversation in Arabic community. And it came over here. And there was a time in the 2000s when hookah bars were very popular. And they still are to an extent. But I think that was kind of a fascinating blip. I don't know if you were ever aware of that little microcosm.
Hookah bar once. Pretty interesting experience. Definitely not something we see too often over here in the States, but it's pretty. It was like nothing I've ever seen before at a restaurant.
Yeah, over here in Colorado, where I live, specifically closer to Denver, hookah bars are something that you can find maybe 3 or 4 in the city, which is a pretty big number. And people go there, typically younger people or Arabic individuals, to discuss things, maybe have some Moroccan mint tea with hookah. It's a very fascinating experience, but it doesn't translate as well. Like people going outside and smoking outside a concert venue is how you'll usually see nicotine consumption in the city of Denver, how I've come across it, just because I go to concerts. But that's kind of as close as it gets. You can't smoke indoors, so there's not as much. And typically, you can't smoke indoors. There's not as much community around that as there used to be in the States due to those smoking laws.
Yeah, and where you are is especially interesting with the whole cannabis. How we're gonna federally tackle that.
Man, I think that's you unleash Pandora's box. You're opening Pandora's box at that point with, marijuana is useful for people with severe severe appetite issues like cancer survivors and people on chemo who can't hold down food if they don't have some marijuana, some cannabis. But that goes the other way, where people are using it so recreationally, and it really blunts motivation in a lot of people. So, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I also think that we need to recognize that substances have a cost, right? It's all about cost and benefit. With alcohol, with caffeine, you have too much caffeine, you get anxious. You have just the right amount, you're alert. With marijuana, you rely on it too much and it becomes a behavioral addiction. And there's a tendency to just blunt out anything stressful and to restrict your life rather than ride through it on the other side, come out the other side and actually be better for confronting your fears. You can definitely address that a lot. That now, I think part of what's so depressing to the Zoomer generation is they're being taught, if you're anxious over anything, just don't do it. Rather than if you're anxious over speaking in public, do it, conquer it, feel better, and move on. I don't know if you've noticed that dichotomy now, where it's like no longer anxiety, something to be overcome. It's kind of like a hazard to just avoid.
Yeah, which, very weird, students saying, oh, if public speaking makes us uncomfortable, we shouldn't be, we should be able to get out of doing it, in front of the class. And it's
Right.
very weird because public speaking, communicating ideas to groups of people, that's something you're inevitably going to have to do.
Gonna have to
So
do it.
it's,
Even with the most digital of jobs now, if you work as a front end or back end web developer, you're gonna have to communicate with a team, maybe on a conference call. So your audience may be small, but you're still gonna have to do that. I mean, that's the realistic truth. And I have empathy. I mean, obviously, as a therapist, a ton of empathy for people with acute, sort of chronic or pathological anxiety. But we know the literature's clear on what works. It's desensitization. So desensitizing it in a space where you know you're safe, but still desensitizing it, that's the way forward, not building up an agoraphobic phobia to it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a weird phase in time now where we're just trying to ignore / avoid the issues at hand.
Absolutely.
If you get shot in the leg, you don't tell yourself, "Oh no, I'm not shot in the leg." There's nothing wrong here. Whereas in reality, you'd say, "Yikes, I am shot in the leg. I should do something about this if anything's going to get better here."
True enough. I completely agree with that. What is something you wish you had known before getting into YouTube or Twitter that you think would be helpful for people to know about these media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely there are, I guess, social media marketing / SEO tactics that I just, naturally learned through trying to figure out to, build an audience, build a following. But I've also learned the value of being very aware of mainstream culture. Mm-hmm. So a lot of parts of the mainstream, I think to myself, oh, that's stupid. I don't want to get involved in that. That's dumb. But something I've realized that's important is being familiar with what people are watching, what people are listening to. SoundCloud rap, not everyone's favorite. Still important to be aware of the culture behind that. What's going on World Star. It's important to be familiar with the culture, even if you think it's pretty stupid. It's because it's important to communicate in such a way where the masses will understand and reciprocate what you're saying. In all my videos, I keep a casual, simple, laid-back approach to these ideas that may be deeper. I don't come at it from, an academic point of view. I come from it in such a way where it's, casual. It's seen as entertainment above all else. Whereas the deeper you go into it, the more you realize, okay, there might be some deep insights and enlightening perspectives to what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's helpful for people to see that there's a side to it, that it doesn't have to be so inaccessible and academic, right? You're saying, well, there's no excuse to not know these ideas. Here's a non-academic version of it for you to employ in your life, listeners, viewers.
Absolutely.
Do you have any favorite movies or literature? We already talked about kind of books or something like that. Favorite bands, stuff that you would point people to that have inspired you. Sometimes I like to get into these kind of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. My top 2 favorite movies of all time. Number 1 might not come as a surprise, but definitely The Matrix.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. We see a lot of ideas from that film integrated into our culture now. Red pill culture, it stemmed from The Matrix.
Made use of that metaphor heavily, obviously.
Absolutely. Next movie would be The Truman Show. Jim Carrey in it. Guy doesn't realize he's in a TV show, but through time he's seeing some very interesting / unusual aspects about his reality, and he starts looking beyond what he grew up thinking to be true. That one's a comedy, so a lot more lighthearted, but definitely those 2 would be my top 2 favorite movies.
Beautiful. Love it. It's fascinating because both of those have to do with reality being pulled out from under someone, but just in different ways. One by media and one by the technocratic robotic overlord. So that's fascinating stuff. The theme of both being be aware of what's going on and look deeper. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you watched Black Mirror at all?
Oh yes, that's a great conversation. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Black Mirror goes straight into many of the ideas that the Matrix presents, just the use of technology, how we evolve with it, benefits slash catastrophes of it. It's interesting seeing how technology evolves. More of us, I guess, are increasingly concerned slash worried about what's going on rather than excited about the innovations that it presents. And Black Mirror really is the zeitgeist of our feelings on what's going on with that.
Yes. I'm looking up the title. There we go. 15 million merits. That's the episode I want to talk about. So on you shared one of Garrett's tweets for everybody out there. I'm talking about Garrett Daly, who's in the Ion group. Tell us if you have any favorite Black Mirror episodes or even the plots that you can think of.
Oh man, I mean, there is that one episode that's pretty much the exact same idea as The Matrix, but one that I think is pertinent in this age of social media is where everyone had that social score profile. So anything you do in your daily life, you could rate each other based on an interaction. Now, everyone has a moving social score out of 5 stars based on how they're interacting with each other. So nobody steps out of line, nobody makes any mistakes, but unfortunately, nobody is pursuing their individualism because that would be different. That wouldn't be appreciated,
wouldn't it?
Now,
yes.
It's really interesting. I don't know if you've seen anything that's going on in China with this social score system, but...
Heard about it. Yes. Riff on that a little bit if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's creepy, because we think about that. We know the shortcomings of that, but any kind of, I guess, Orwellian technological authoritarian society would imagine something George Orwell didn't realize is that we would really be motivated to latch onto that. We are excited to use an app that constantly takes pictures of us that we distribute. We've been using it for years because all our friends are using it. We're excited to use it. And
right.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we're much more consensual with this technology than I guess we realize we would be.
Well, Orwell had some ideas, but I'm far more of a believer in the sort of Brave New World Aldous Huxley stuff, right?
That is definitely more the direction we're moving in.
Entertaining oneself to death is much more psychologically likely. I think the velvet glove over the iron hand is the absolute zenith of human control, and that's what describes the sort of likely. If we have a dystopia, it will look like that, because human reactivity and revolutionary tendencies will always rise up eventually, especially when generations are exposed to, like, people. One generation can be totally brainwashed, but then as others develop and are born into a system and they question the why, and they wonder why, and they're exposed to maybe different cultures that involve capitalism, things like that, they're going to recognize, well, wait a minute, things don't have to be this way, right? If there's going to be an uprising. So if you don't placate people and give them enough buy-in and reason to adhere to a system, they're going to revolt. So you give them enough joy and you give them the dopamine hit, and they won't. So it's a very terrifying idea. But I found the tweet that you shared, that Garrett shared on July 10th. It was, broke, I hate capitalism, woke, our brand is socially aware, buy our crap, boycott theirs. Okay. And then bespoke is, that company offered token support for insert 2019 issue here, so I bought their stuff. I hate capitalism, trademark. So I immediately thought of that Black Mirror episode, the credits episode, where people were essentially competing for credits, and someone revolts, goes on a show, and it essentially threatens to kill himself. The episode's called 15 Million Merits, and it's season 1, episode 2. I really, really, really encourage anyone to watch it, because I won't spoil too much, but the end is it shows the idea that capitalism and consumerism can wrap itself around any cause, no matter how seemingly iconoclastic or rebellious. And so Garrett's tweet, which you shared, shows you can say, I hate capitalism, support my stance by buying this stuff, right? Consume identity, consume your rebellion. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, because it's so interesting to, people who think they're, Rage Against the Machine has these lyrics that, what you need is what they're selling. They make you think that buying is rebelling,
Absolutely.
You're not woke for agreeing with what the major corporations are using to try to appeal to you, It's so it's really interesting, I guess, the marketing aspect behind all that.
Yeah. I mean, people are just going to continuously find ways to sell and repurpose things. There's a Wisecrack video about why brands are people now. So companies like Burger King will tweet in the first person. And so we had this idea of marketing that starts in the mid 20th century being very driven by just facts. And you know how long commercials were back then, if you've ever seen one where it's like they go over every last thing. Family Guy had a joke where like a commercial was
of a Raisin Bran commercial.
Oh, you remember that? Yes, thank you. And then Peter says, "Wow, these commercials go so fast." And the commercial was like a minute of just slow stuff. So then you have like in the 90s, let's fast forward a bit to this sort of ironic wink, wink. We're selling you something, but we know you're going to get it. You're cool. You get it. You're in on it. And now we've gone over to this very post-irony level of let's sell authenticity. So brand like Burger King had the sad meal, and it's like swinging that way into post-irony. And so now that's the big hallmark of metamodernism, this idea that postmodernism was that all these narratives are conflicting, nothing's right, it's all wrong. But now we have this uprising of, okay, you have different narratives, but they can be integrated and synthesized, with your online identity, and it's a positive thing. It doesn't have to be dystopian, and authenticity is important again, and it's very ironic. So it's postmodern or metamodern. It's like a knowing wink wink thing at this point.
Yeah, we're constantly memeing ourselves.
Yes, Seth Abramson has written some really good articles on metamodernism, and really the idea, if people want to get an idea of it, is spelled out a lot in Infinite Jest. If you're familiar with David Foster Wallace and his work, he's a good author.
Yeah.
Say what you want about him personally. He had some demons that.
Yeah, I love his idea on, you're surrounded in water, but a fish says, "What the hell is water?"
Yes. What the hell is social media? What the hell is a smartphone or life without one? Right? It's tough. I mean, it becomes entrenched in people's minds, these technologies, and it's the devil, and you can't have people go against it and hurt themselves by being iconoclasts that just tear down technology. But also you have to be aware enough that it's not your whole identity. So there's really no turning back in a sense, unless everyone were to at the same time, or you're at a disadvantage, especially as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, integrated with technology, and experience I had recently was, I thought, should I turn on facial recognition for my iPhone, so I can open it up faster? I ended up choosing convenience over the security, so that was an instance where I was fine just, allowing technology to have that right. And something that many of us aren't thinking about or as concerned about anymore.
Right. Convenient. And that's the thing. It's the velvet glove. It's, come on, what is the chance of someone using this against you versus the hours you'll save? I mean, that is a seductive offer.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think this is maybe a good place to leave our listeners pondering on the bigger questions in life. Do you want to share anything about where listeners can find you, what you're working on now? I want to open up the floor to whatever you want to share, man, whether or not it's on topic, off topic, whatever.
Absolutely. So I've got many interesting videos coming out this summer. You can find them on YouTube. Channel is Philosophase. You can also find me at Philosophase at Twitter, Instagram, any social media. you name it. And again, if you're into deep insights and enlightening perspectives, you know where to find them.
Yes, I love it. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeremy.